Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you and I want to introduce you to someone really special to me. If you don't know his name already, then you really should. He's written almost 40 books in his popular Conversations with God series, which some of the books actually have been translated into 37 different languages around the world. So, welcome, Neale.
If you don't know my name by now, I'm out of here. Goodbye. Thanks for being here. So long. Goodbye. Just kidding.
Anyway, let me ask you a question. Your background, I've never heard you spoke about this before, but I know that in your childhood you were with a kind of religious family. How did you move from that to and learn what you did learn and all the experiences as being in radio, as a radio producer and things like that, till now? How did you, what kind of things did you learn out of that anyway?
Well, in retrospect, which is easier to talk about than in the present moment. In retrospect, I can tell you that yes, you're right. I was raised in a Catholic family, a lovely, sweet family. I had a wonderful mother and a fabulous father, and I have no negative feelings whatsoever about my childhood. I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. But that having been said, I was sent to a Roman Catholic elementary school, and I was raised in my earliest years in the Catholic faith. Now, I'm not a Catholic basher. I'm not here to talk badly about the faith. But what I learned in retrospect was that not everything that all of the world's religions are telling us may be accurate. I believe that the world's religions, and by the way, there are over 4,000 religions in the world right now. That's not a number I made up, it's an actual count. But all of the world's religions contain a great deal of truth, much wonderful truth, great insights, and great wisdom. But I have observed through the years that they seem to be incomplete. They may not have the whole story. They may not be telling everything that there is to tell, because they may not have known when those religions were created all that there is to know. Because as we advance as a civilization, as we evolve as a species, we learn more. We've learned more in science, we've learned more in medicine, we've learned more in technology, and we've learned more in the area of our most fundamental basic beliefs, except in the area of our fundamental basic beliefs, as opposed to science and medicine and technology. In the area of our beliefs, we're not allowed to change our mind. We're not allowed to even ask questions. We are told by those religions that we must stick with and stick to what we were told in those religions, even though the dogma and the doctrine of many of those religions was established hundreds and maybe even thousands of years ago. Now, Gary, if we did the same thing in science or medicine or technology, we'd be trying to send a man to the moon, with a stick of dynamite, or we'd be conducting brain surgery with a very sharp stone, because we'd be using first century technology in 21st century situations and to solve 21st century problems. So what I've learned through the years is that what I learned earlier may not be the whole story. And that's not a small thing to learn. So I came to that awareness long before I had what I have called my Conversations with God experience. In fact, it was my awareness that there was more to know, more than I had been taught. In my 20s or 30s, I was very clear about that. And so I began to ask myself a powerful question. Is it possible, just possible, that there's something we don't fully understand here about life, about ourselves, about each other, and about this thing we call God? or Allah or Brahman or Yahweh or Jehovah or whatever word we want to use to refer to that ineffable essence that many of us call the divine. Is it possible that there's more to know on this subject? Even as we have discovered that there's more to know in science, there's more to know in medicine, there's more to know in technology. We have not acquired the full body of knowledge in those areas. And I think it would be very wise for us to also assume that we have not acquired the full body of knowledge in the area of our most sacred beliefs about life, about ourselves, and about God. So, but I had a very wonderful upbringing, Gary. I had wonderful parents. I'm very blessed in that regard. I had, siblings who were wonderful. My brothers. I had no sisters, but I did have 3 brothers. And I just, I had a great time in high school, and I flunked out of college. I didn't stay in college more than 3 months. I lasted about 90 days, and the dean of men called me into his office, and he invited me to give up my seat. He said, we have a limited number of chairs in this university, and we'd like to devote our chairs to people who really want to learn something. And I wasn't going to class. I didn't have an interest. So I was being marked absent by almost all of my professors until, the dean of men invited me to come back to the university whenever I felt I was willing to sit down and learn something. Well, I was too arrogant at that point in my life to do that. So I just left the university, and it wasn't for me. And I went immediately into the world of work. Now, I was 19 years old because I was 19 when I entered college for my first year. I lasted, as I said, 3 months. And when I got out of college, I went right into the broadcasting business. I went immediately into the love of my life at that time, which was radio. I always wanted to be a radio announcer, and I got to be a radio announcer at the age of 19.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful joy of my life. I couldn't believe that people were paying me, actually putting money in my hand to sit there, in front of a microphone and simply say things like, "It's 20 after 4 o'clock, 45 degrees outside, and here's the news." I mean, I was being paid to do this. And it was so simple. So I didn't need a college education. I guess I should have realized later that if I was going to be an articulate person, a little bit of learning might have helped me. But at the time, at 19, I just wanted what I wanted to do. So I went right into broadcasting, and I stayed in the broadcasting business for many years. In one way or another, full-time or part-time, for almost 27 years. I had something to do with the broadcasting industry. But I also wound up in my terms of my full-time career, when I reached, I guess I was about 27, I moved into journalism, and I became a reporter for a local newspaper. And then I began writing for the Associated Press, which is a global syndicated news service that many people have heard about. It's called the AP, the Associated Press. And then I became the managing editor of a small weekly newspaper in the town in which I lived, which was on the East Coast in Annapolis, Maryland. So I moved from radio to newspaper work, but I spent most of my younger adult years, my 20s and 30s, in the media business as a member of the professional media. And I didn't have a college education, as I've mentioned now, but if you want to learn stuff fast about life, be in the media, because people I interviewed, things I had to investigate in order to do an interview, all of those things. I had to read books in order to interview somebody and so forth. So it was kind of like a liberal education without paying tuition at a college to get it. So by the time I got to be around 45 years old or so, I felt, okay, I've learned a few things about life, and I'm ready now to move forward with the rest of my life. So you know what, Gary, the short story of a very long narrative is I've had a good life. But let me share with you one little twist.
Yeah.
There's a little twist at the end of that story. When I was 48 years old, life decided to throw me what I call the triple whammy. Most of us run into, maybe a problem in our relationships once or twice in our life, or most of us run into maybe a problem in our career once or twice in our life, or most of us run into a little health complication once or twice in our life. But I was given all three within the same 10-day period. My marriage at the time ended. I don't need to go into all the reasons why, but it was mostly my fault, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And so the marriage ended, and that was the end of that particular experience. But within 5 days, I lost my job. I was in broadcasting, but and I was doing a good job. I wasn't fired because of incompetence, but the station was losing money and they had to cut some overhead. And I was the newest arrival, so I had no seniority. The old story in business: last one in, first one out. So I was out the door. They had to cut back the staff, and so I was downsized. So within 5 days, I'm out of a marriage and out of a job. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, 3 days after that, an older gentleman, little 84-year-old guy, lovely man, but he was turning into his driveway, and I was driving down the road in the opposite direction. And he turned right in front of me. He made a left turn right in front of me. And later on, he acknowledged the police report showed, everyone agreed, the insurance company, everyone agreed it was his fault. But I suffered a broken neck in that accident. And the insurance company decided it would take like forever to settle the claim. They took almost 2.5 years to talk me down from what they thought I was going to ask for, because I suffered a broken neck. And it was not a small hairline fracture, Gary. It was, I'll never forget the wording. To this day, I recall the wording on the medical report. It said that I had suffered a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly. Gary, that's a break in your neck. 3/4 inches wide, not a hairline fracture. It's a
Wow.
break in your neck big enough to put a pencil through.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. I was wearing what's known as a Philadelphia collar, which is a therapeutic device. Now, I didn't suffer long-lasting paralysis, and I didn't die. The doctor said, you should have died. Most people who have this kind of an injury die instantly because of spinal cord complications. But somehow or another, maybe by a millimeter off, your spinal cord was not involved, and you did not die, nor did you suffer paralysis. But you are going to have to wear this therapeutic device for quite a while, because your head is like a basketball being held on the head of a pin. There's nothing to hold up your head. So I had to wear this brace on my neck. Now I was out of work, out of a relationship, trying to find a place to live, no income. I couldn't find an apartment. I finally had a little place that a friend gave me, but I couldn't pay anything at all. And he finally had to ask me to leave. And I wound up living on the street. Nowhere to go, no income, no way to make income, because nobody would hire me, Gary. I went everywhere to look for a job. I went to supermarkets. I said, look, I'll mop the floor. I'll do whatever you need. I'll stock the shelves, whatever you need. And I was not a young man. I was 49 years old, but I didn't have any pride that stopped me. I said, I'll do any kind of work. I just need to make some income. I went to hotels, and I said, I'll clean the bathrooms. I'll be a janitor. I'll do whatever it takes. Nobody would hire me, Gary, because then finally somebody was honest with me. Finally, a place where I applied, the man said, Mr. Walsh, we can't hire you with that gadget on your neck. Obviously, you have a severe injury. You make one wrong move while you're employed by us, and our insurance is paying for your medical bills for the next 20 years. We can't hire you. Come back when you're in good physical condition. So nobody would hire me. I wound up living on the sidewalk for a year of my life. Not a couple of bad months, not a tough winter, but for an entire year of my life, sleeping on the ground and going from person to person during the day with my hand out, asking if I could please have a few coins or maybe $1 or $2 that they could spare so that I could eat that day. And I wasn't exaggerating, because if I didn't get any money, I wasn't eating. My former wife did allow me to have the tent. We had a tent for the kids, and she said, "Oh, I'll take the tent." So I was able to take the tent, and I could get out of the weather. I wasn't in the rain, but I was still in the cold. It's darn cold in a tent. So I didn't have any rain falling or snow falling on me, but I did have the cold. And I was sleeping in that tent for the rest of the year in a homeless park. And
Yeah.
that's when, at the age of 50, I finally found a little part-time job back in radio. I got a little job, a weekend fill-in job, just enough money to afford a tiny little studio apartment over somebody's garage. And it was okay because I was out of the weather. And I was grateful to be in this little apartment over this guy's garage. But I woke up one morning, a couple of weeks after I was back undercover, and I sat down in the living room. He had some used furniture that he threw in there for me, a couch and a chair and a bed, because of course I had nothing. But he had some used furniture, so he put a couple of pieces of furniture in that little apartment. And I sat on that used couch, and I began writing a very angry letter to God.
Right.
What does it take? What does it take to make life work? What have I done to deserve a life of such endless struggle? I can remember writing on the tablet, calling out to God in my mind, "Tell me the rules. I'll play. I promise I'll play the game. Just tell me the rules. How does it work? What's the whole point of it? Obviously, there's something I don't understand here," the understanding of which would change everything. And I began receiving answers to my questions in the form of thoughts in my mind, thoughts that I never had before. It was a voice in my mind talking to me. And I wrote down on the yellow legal pad, I actually had written a letter on a yellow legal pad, just as an exercise. I don't know what I thought I was doing. I wasn't trying to write a book, but I was just as an exercise. It's 4:30 in the morning, and I was writing down these questions, to God. But I began hearing answers, so I wrote down the answers. I thought, well, I'll write down what I'm hearing. The answers became intriguing and more intriguing and more intriguing. And before I knew it, I was asking more questions, receiving more answers, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, until I wound up having an on paper conversation with God.